Hey, this is Josh with The Verge, and we are live at Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference. You know, it's been a roller coaster of a day, beginning with me nearly getting run over by thousands of extremely angry and anxious developers desperately trying to claw and punch their way to a cheap and pretty uncomfortable seat.
There are plenty of seats for you. You will get a seat. You're okay. You're still on Earth. You will sit down, I promise. There are too many seats if you ask me.
But obviously that's not the main story. The big story is that Apple had a bunch of announcements. iOS 8, a new version of OS 10 called Yosemite, several weed jokes on stage. Actually, a pretty good run of weed jokes on stage.
OS 10, weed. Strangely, this one had large pockets of support within the product marketing organization.
So Yosemite is obviously a big deal. It's a complete visual revamp of OS 10 for the desktop. It looks a lot more like iOS. There's a bunch of new features, but I thought the most notable thing that they're including is something that Apple's calling continuity, which is actually a cross-platform feature. It is a way that you can sort of push your application states from your desktop to your iPad or your iPhone and vice versa. And there's a lot of interplay there that's really similar to an idea that I had a few years ago called the continuous client, which would allow you to kind of place shift the stuff that you're doing on your devices from one to the other. And there's some really interesting things that Apple's doing with stuff like proximity awareness, where your computer will know that your phone is nearby and will be able to answer a call from it, which is kind of a huge thing. And I've been sitting at my computer a billion times wishing that I could make a call or answer a call from the desktop instead of having to do it from the phone that was sitting next to it. So I think that's one of the most notable things that they did today in terms of Yosemite. But obviously the visual refreshes in Safari, a new engine that's powering Safari that's extremely fast and power efficient. And I think, you know, most importantly, what's interesting about continuity is that it allows you to place a call to Dr. Dre while at your desktop.
By the way, I'm glad you called. I hear Tim gets in pretty early. What time should I show up for work?
If you want to beat Tim into the office, it'd be about 4:30. But I think, orientation, new employee orientation starts at 9. So, and you don't want to miss the free t-shirt. So I'd shoot for 9.
I don't know if that's a feature that's available to everybody or just to Craig Federighi, but it's intriguing. Apple also introduced iOS 8 today, which is a pretty major update from the previous version of the software. Not a lot of visual changes that I could see, at least during the demos that they had, but some really interesting new features and a lot of under the hood stuff. One of the things that's really notable is that they've updated notifications, and you can now take action on a notification right from the drop-down panel, so you can like something on Facebook or reply to a message. Another interesting thing they've done with the notification center is they've added widgets to it, so a third-party developer can plug in glanceable information that you can access right from the notification panel. I mentioned there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on, and one of the big features is extensions. Apple's allowing developers to make their applications extensible and plug into more of the system architecture. So you'll be able to share from apps to a lot of other apps now, including Apple's first-party apps. For instance, Pinterest sharing or Instagram sharing will now be able to be built in at a system level. And you can also have things like photo filters, say a Visco photo filter in your Photos app that you can apply right from within that application. So that's a huge underlying change to the way Apple is running its iOS platform, and it's going to create a lot of opportunities for developers to plug into each other's apps and to Apple's apps in a brand new way. They're also allowing third-party keyboards, which is a huge sea change for Apple. They've been proselytizing their keyboard as the best in the business since pretty much day one on the iPhone. And this is definitely a change in attitude about the keyboard and about users' ability to customize their experience. Apple is also including continuity, obviously, in iOS 8. It's a big part of how it plays with your desktop, so that's kind of awesome. And there's some new multitasking features. You can now get to your favorite contacts from within the multitasker. You can also access Siri without having to actually touch the phone. Elsewhere, there's some slight tweaks, some interesting changes to Mail with new gestures to manage your mailbox and sort of multitask while you're working on a message. And there's also maybe some changes to the speed with which the OS actually operates, but that might have just been for demo purposes. But overall, you know, this really did feel like a developer-focused WWDC, maybe more so than they've ever done in the past. And in fact, they introduced a new programming language here called Swift, which people kind of went crazy for in the room, and I think is a really notable move today, maybe the biggest story of the day, because it's certainly going to have a long-term impact on Apple's platforms. But I think the most notable thing that happened today is that Apple seemed to be having a lot more fun. They were looser, they were more open, they were cracking jokes, and I think the vibe in the room was very different from previous years at this event. And hopefully, that's a little bit of the new way forward for the company.